Hello, my name is Dr. Amy Breeze Harper, and some of you know me from my work on the Sister Vegan Project, which started about 11 years ago. The first thing that came out from that was the Sister Vegan Anthology. It's the first book of its kind that really looks at what it's like to be racialized as a Black woman in this country and to practice veganism. What does life look like to you? What is health, nutrition, society? How do you experience that? So 11 years later, I'm still doing work that's associated with veganism, but also intersectional justice. So I want to kind of talk more about the work that I'm doing and how I frame justice. And first of all, I want to say that for those of you who attended the Animal Rights Conference, the national conference that took place a few days ago in Los Angeles, my apologies that I could not attend, especially attend with my running mate. I'm the vice presidential running mate, the candidate running mate for the Humane Party with Clifton Roberts, and he was there representing, and I just wasn't able to attend. My apologies, but there are a lot of people that I saw there via videos and pictures that Clifton and friends sent. It looks like everyone had a fantastic time. I couldn't come because we're looking for housing for my family. Yay, California, and the never-ending search for affordable housing for those who are not the wealthiest. And also just taking care of 3 little kids, and I'm about 6 months pregnant now, so just wasn't able to make it down there. But I want to actually talk more about, what I do, and people have had lots of questions since I was nominated to be the vice presidential running mate with Clifton Roberts. I've been practicing veganism for about, 11 years now, and I make this very clear, with the exception of my first pregnancy back in 2008, where I did eat several eggs each month. And I talk about this on my blog about this anyway, about just the fears I even had, and giving in and self-doubt, listening to people tell me that it's not healthy, how can you do that? But to also say that I'm pregnant for the 4th time, so pregnancies 2, 3, and 4 were all vegan, and it went very well. And I offer a webinar to people who are pregnant who want to do the same thing. My veganism isn't really one-dimensional at all, and there are a lot of people who do pursue their ethical consumption philosophies through a one-dimensional lens. I am a critical race feminist, so what that means is I went to school for this, I was trained in it, really understanding systems of oppression, and I focus my work on ethical veganism, but with the understanding that we don't live in a vacuum here in the United States, and that we live in a system that was built on white supremacist racial casting. So it's a white supremacist racial caste system and capitalist system as well. And for me to understand ethical veganism and ethical consumption, I have to understand how such a system over the last 500 years influences one's consciousness around ethics, identity, society, everything. So my work tries to understand non-human animals and how they have been exploited, but also my work in parallel to that focuses on mostly dismantling systemic racism, with a large focus on anti-Blackness and focusing on the current Black Lives Matter movement. So 2015 of last year in the spring, I actually put together a conference called the Vegan Praxis of Black Lives Matter. And this was in response to a lot of my own colleagues who are Black identified and vegan, who saw that a lot of people engaged in animal rights, were mostly white identified, did not understand the significance of Black Lives Matter, didn't really have a critical race literacy for a post-2000 era. And there was a lot of, unfortunately, ignorance around the fact that racism is still in existence, but it's changed. It manifests differently than it did 60 years ago, or how most of us that have lived in the United States and gone through K through 12 education have been taught what it's supposed to look like, i.e., a racist, a white supremacist is someone who is a KKK member, somebody who goes out and says that they're going to shoot or lynch black people, Muslims, brown people. That's what racism looks like. And with that type of experience, seeing that on mostly operating not just on Facebook, which I spent a lot of my time on as a site for cyber ethnography to really understand how white identified people produce ethical consumption ideologies. I also noticed a lot of this from the many talks I've given throughout North America and the responses I've gotten from probably 97% white people who dismiss the realities of racism because they have a critical race literacy from 1950, which is a problem in itself. So I put together the vegan praxis of Black Lives Matter because there were so many people on Facebook, the circles I was in, trying to talk about veganism, that would say things like all lives matter and had no real deep understanding of what Black Lives Matter means and the realities of anti-Blackness, not just when it comes to the criminal justice system and racialized policing, but how it is in every fabric of life and that it literally does influence how they and everyone else thinks about Black people, brown people, non-white people in this country of African descent. So I put that together. And the other reason I did that too is that there was a lot of people who believe that you can't put both together. What does that have to do with anything? And I explained the way I approach veganism is ahimsa, and I'm not perfect at it. I'm on a continuum. I'm always learning. It's nonviolence. It's understanding what nonviolence looks like. And I consider both anti-speciesism and dismantling systemic racism and understanding how to dismantle anti-Blackness, white supremacy. That is nonviolence. That's creating nonviolence. So, and you can't understand these systems of oppression, which are all connected but not the same, from a one-dimensional standpoint, whether it's an anti-racist person who's doing this work one-dimensionally or someone who is committed to veganism for non-human animals. You can't understand this unless you take an intersectional approach. And this conference that I put together really focused on bringing that together in a way that enhances both anti-racism work and vegan animal rights work. So it was called the Vegan Praxis of Black Lives Matter. I had 200 spots available, and I believe 190 people signed up. And a year and a half later, people are still contacting me that this event literally changed their life. It changed their view. It really opened up what was missing from what they had been taught either as anti-racist or vegan activists, which was basically you could only do a one-dimensional approach to anything, or that if you bring up veganism and race and anti-racist work, it's a distraction. Or if you bring up, anti-racism and Black Lives Matter and mainstream white vegan work, it's a distraction. So it completely obliterated that. And for them, it showed them how that they both are possible. They're both possible to do simultaneously and to enrich each other. So that's basically a lot of the work that I've done. And currently, I am working on putting together something called intersectional approaches to anti-racism. So I've been giving lectures and workshops this past year, largely universities, but also consulting with several nonprofits and businesses about what it looks like to have a racial justice framework within this concept of ethical consumption and really focusing on veganism, animal rights. So what does that look like? So that's what I've been doing lately. And one of the key focuses within that focus is what to do about this concept of white fragility, which is unconscious or conscious. It's this strategy collectively that white people have who feel like, well, I'm not the real racist. I don't want to talk about racism. It's a strategy that's enacted to kind of deflect from the real problems of systemic racism and really focus on the fact that I can't believe that you, a non-white person, is accusing me, a white person, of being racist when I know there's no racism. So there's these, mechanisms that white people have in place collectively to deny and dismiss the reality of what people of color have experienced, and also the realities of the scores of years of critical race legal studies, literature, scholarship that show that that a white supremacist racial caste system still has significant impact on the livelihoods, the ability to thrive of non-white people in this country. So my focus is to get beyond white fragility in a non-judgmental and ahimsa-based way. That, yes, feelings are okay, it's great, we all have them, and as a white person, most likely you've been racialized and socialized to always avoid conversations of race, and when it comes up, you're gonna be uncomfortable. That's how it works. So we talk about that, but we move beyond just being stuck at emotions and white people feeling guilty or about them, and going to action plans of how you actually can be an agent for change as a white person. So that's what I've been doing this year. And it's been interesting over the past year. I've got a lot of positive responses, but I've also gotten a lot of negativity, which this is what comes with the work you've been doing. I've gotten a lot of negativity from white people, what I consider threats as well, and bullying, calling me a white-hating bigot and a racist because I've decided to not be silent and talk about it. And let's be clear, okay? I understand I'm a 40-year-old woman in white America doing this work. I understand that there is going to be backlash. There's always backlash. And I will not be silent about it. I will try to do this work as lovingly as possible with compassion and ahimsa. But I won't be silent about it. So I've been getting a lot of, indirect, direct threats and bullying around the work I've been doing for the last 12 years. When I first proposed the Sister Vegan Project, a book that wanted to interrogate, the experiences of Black women vegans, I received a lot of support, but I also received a lot of hate and negativity that I dare question the implications of whiteness and race and how someone comes to their vegan practice. And as a matter of fact, there was a forum that posted my call for papers back in 2005. In that forum, there were a plethora of white-identified vegans, and it was mostly white vegans, that bashed the concept. And these are people who didn't even consider themselves racist, but they were still enacting white supremacist ideologies around what should and should not be properly enacted veganism. And it actually became my master's thesis work. I use that as empirical evidence to really show what does covert whiteness from well-meaning white vegans look like? What does that look like? Because the work had already been done. Looking into cyberspace at the KKK and neo-Nazis, we already know that overt racists exist. But what does it look like amongst white people who truly do not think of themselves as racist, and that they think they're good people because they practice veganism? And that work, this is Breeze Harper. So when these challenges come, when people immediately have this negative response to the work that I'm doing, this intersectional approach to justice, this critical race feminist approach to justice, I see that as an opportunity to take that as empirical evidence and then use different disciplines such as sociology, anthropology, I'm actually a cultural geographer, but also feminist studies, discursively analyze that to understand what's happening and then propose a solution. So I saw that as an opportunity, and that's how I function. So since last year, the threats and the bullying have upped a lot. And for me, it's just an opportunity to use that to bolster the work that I'm doing. It's all empirical evidence because, all of that's happening. You can see that the theories have already been written about for the last few decades. This is what white fragility looks like. This is what defensiveness looks like. This is what it looks like when even well-meaning white people are colluding with systems of oppression, even if they think they're engaged in something as ethical as veganism and animal rights. So this is what it looks like, and how can I create action plans and action steps to go and get people to just go beyond that, be gentle with themselves, and that it's okay that, you actually may have screwed up over the last 2 decades because you didn't know that what you were doing, though with good intentions, had negative racialized impact, right? That's what Breeze Harper does. I use all those opportunities to really create action plans. Sometimes they don't work, but most of the time I get positive responses from mostly white-identified people saying that the workshops, the publications, the lectures that I give have really helped them to get rid of the fears they did have about speaking as a white person, or get rid of the biases that they had about what they thought Black Lives Matter was, about what they thought systemic racism was, about what they thought how veganism should be, and beyond. So lastly, I want to get back to when I said I'm a critical race feminist by training, that, like, you know, I understand the intersections of oppression are not one-dimensional, and you can't understand the oppression of indigenous people without understanding systems of capitalism. You can't understand, the exploitative system of capitalism without understanding systemic poverty, and so on. This is how my work works. So they're not all the same, but it's this, machinery that has all these components: racism, sexism, speciesism, ableism. How they all work in parts together, and that you cannot successfully be a anti-racist or an anti-species, an anti-sexist, without really understanding all those moving parts and being an ally and being in solidarity with all those other people or groups that are engaged in breaking those systems down as people who live as marginalized people in those systems of oppression. So that's the work I do, and that's who Dr. Amy Breeze Harper is at the moment, and basically has been for the last 12 years, as a person who's the director of the Sister Vegan Project, but also as a person who is the vice presidential running mate with Clifton Roberts on the Humane Party. So that's about, what I want to share with folk. And once again, sorry I missed the Animal Rights National Conference of 2016, but hopefully I can go next year and maybe give one of those workshops. I think that would be great, about dismantling racism, systems of racism within ethical consumption veganism, and going beyond and just kind of breaking through white fragility. So thank you. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email me or post on my YouTube wall. I do have, I do work for myself. I have 3 little ones, another one on the way. So if I don't respond immediately, it's not that Breeze Harper thinks she's too good to talk to you. It's because I have a real, big schedule. I love what I do. I love being my children's mother and just like mothering them. Of course, that I love doing the scholarship and the activism and consulting I do, but it's like a triple work day. So, and I talk about that a lot in my work, the difficulty in the society, that there is really no structural support for people who are primary caregivers of children still, 2016, and they're mostly women identified people. There just isn't that support that we need. So it is more challenging for me to do this, but it's not impossible. So if I don't respond to you, it's probably because I have a 2-year-old screaming, "Mommy, mommy, mommy." Okay? Thanks. Bye.